Steve Franks.
Good afternoon, gents. Pleasure to be here. It's amazing to see everyone here as well. Coming up, we weren't sure of how many were going to be here, if any. So it's really encouraging that you guys are here. And of course, it's not about numbers, but it's about as many people as possible. And as Gerald said, our heart is that this isn't a self-help program. It's not just about writing another book. The only thing that actually matters is that we as people encounter the presence of God. We encounter the Spirit of God. We encounter Jesus, our Saviour. Nothing else matters, and nothing else will help. My story is that I grew up as the youngest of 4 in a Christian family. I first became aware of girls at about the age of 10, 11, when I started having kissing games in the playground at primary school. I didn't experience or discover masturbation until I was about 14, and I discovered it accidentally whilst being at home one day, bored by myself. Just prior to that, there had been a build-up of when I first went to secondary school. I first started hearing friends who weren't Christians start talking about things and using words like pornography that I'd never heard of before growing up in a Christian family. So I discovered masturbation for the first time after hearing about it talked a lot by my friends at the age of 14. And then it wasn't until the age of 16, 17 that I first discovered pornography. And that was mainly because by the time I've reached that age, I'm now able to make some decisions for myself in life. I'm coming out from underneath my parents' wings, and suddenly I'm experiencing a bit of freedom, and I'm experiencing the power of choice. And I'm suddenly experiencing the responsibility of choice. So I just go with the default mode of what all my friends at school are talking about. And being a footballer, a massive part of the football culture is pornography and sex and how many birds you've been with at the weekend. So as I go into my 20s, and I've got things like TV in my room, I start asking friends to get me some DVDs and some material. And it's around that age that I'm now linking masturbation with pornography. And what starts off as a bit of excitement, and what starts off as a bit of intrigue, and what starts off as, well, I guess I'll do this because this is what everyone else is doing, suddenly I'm aware it's having an effect on me. I'm able to articulate this now, but at the time I wasn't able to articulate it. But at the time I was aware it was having an effect on me. So now I'm into my young, early 20s. I've moved away from home. I was born in Devon. I'm now living in Surrey, working with Gerald, working with church. I'm in a house share with other friends who are Christians, but I've got my own bedroom. I've now got my own laptop. And although I am living in community and very much involved, I'm aware at the same time I can be very, very isolated, I can be very private, and I can basically let people get as close to me as I choose to let them. So what happens is I've now got a laptop, I'm given an opportunity, I've never had this before, I've never tasted this sense of freedom before, and so now I'm clicking on the internet and I'm looking for images. And what starts off as inquisitive and what starts off as I'll only go that far, after a little while that doesn't become enough. And so you start searching for more. And that grows and grows and grows. And it got out of control to the point where my daily habit, part of who I was now, and part of my daily habit was to be masturbating several times a day and accessing pornography several times a day, no more than 5-10 minutes at a time. But then there would be really bad days where if I'm going to meet the boys for football at 12:30, I'm getting up at 8 in preparation. I'm spending the whole morning looking at pornography. And although I feel awful after, at the same time it comes with a sense of, this feels normal, this feels horrible, I hate who I am when I'm doing this, but it just seems so powerful. How can I ever get free? So whilst I'm trying to be the person that I want to be, which is a son of God, a man of God, aspiring to leadership, aspiring for influence, aspiring to be a husband one day, I've got this thing on my back in the background. I'm aware that other Christian friends have got it as well, but there doesn't really seem to be a sense of, this won't do, what can we do about it? It's just a case of, well, that's just part of life. It's just part of being a Western guy, part of being an English guy, part of being a Christian guy, that's life. At the age of 24, I'm invited to the States to attend a conference. Well, I'm there for 2 weeks. The first week is for a conference, the second week is just a holiday. I go there with this backdrop of having grown up in a Christian family, having my life radically changed one night in my early 20s when I encountered God in a powerful way. Many, many things in my life changed, and I started becoming who it is that I longed to be, but I still had this thing on my back. And I was aware that I was never going to be who I wanted to be, and I was never going to be who God wanted me to be if this thing was still on my back. So I go to this conference, and I didn't know what I was going to, really. So although I was in a prayerful state of, I'm not happy with this pornography addiction that I have and this masturbating addiction that I have, I'm just going to go there, I'm going to see what these guys do, I'm going to see what God's doing. I'm there away from home in total of 2 weeks. When I come back, after having no one prayed for me, after having no one talk to me about anything specific, not really having given this pornography thing any real thought whilst I'm away, when I come back, as the days turn into weeks, I realise I'm not doing it anymore. This is after 5-10 years of masturbating and pornography having a part in my life, and realise I'm not doing it anymore. And the weeks turn into months and turn into a year. A whole year has now passed since I've masturbated or looked at any kind of image. When I'm watching TV, if I think an image is going to come on the screen that I feel may be a trigger to me now going down the path of an unhelpful active behaviour, then I'm turning it off. If there's a tune on the radio that comes on that I feel may stir my tanks in that kind of sense, then I'll switch it off. Suddenly I found that my guards were up and that this thing wasn't an issue anymore. I would love to be able to say that this happened, the fruit of which is I'm now free from addiction. This is how you can do it. But it's not, in a sense, that easy. Because what I recognised was happening is that as those days and weeks were turning into months and eventually a year, it wasn't so much the fact that I wasn't looking at images and I wasn't masturbating. That was a fruit of something else that was going on. And the thing that was going on is that I was filling my life with the Spirit of God. And I was filling my life with God. So that year came. After that year, I found that masturbation started creeping back into my life. But because I had a new guard and rhythm in my life up against pornography, my mind would now use other images when masturbating. And so I would use images of friends that were girls from church, something that I've seen on an advert. In other words, it doesn't matter what it is, my mind found material to use, to lust over, to feed my habit. So that year turns into 2 of masturbating on and off. I then get to a fresh new stage where I'm not happy with masturbating because I don't believe it's in the Spirit of Jesus, and I don't think it's in line with what he would have for me and who he'd want me to be. So I'm trying different ways of kicking this habit out. I'm trying to learn practical ways, not being in my room late at night with a laptop or my iPhone, for example. Things like this I'm sure we've all tried. But as things are going on, I'm realising that I'm actually realising two things, and I want to end with this. Firstly, it is that growing up as a young guy in a Christian household and church, my default mode is God will do everything for me. He'll lead me where I need to go. He'll feed me all the words that I need for life. He'll feed me work. He'll feed me relationships, connections, opportunities, etc. I'm just going to sit here and receive it and get on with it. And so what happened is that there was a lack of taking ownership of the life of God for myself. I don't know if that makes sense. It may make sense to some of you, it may not to others. So coming up to speed now with that first point, I've discovered that although God is there for me, He's done everything that He can to make Himself and all of His kingdom opportunities available to me. It's now for me to take ownership of that. And so I've got to choose, as now life is ahead of me at the age of 31, as a single guy, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be? What do I want my life to be about? What message do I want my life to be about? That was my first point. And the second point is, whenever I feel, and it does come down to real practical things, and this isn't going to be massively revelatory, but it does come down to some real practical points, and that is when I'm just going about my daily business, just life. I can even be in the middle of exercise, and I'll just feel that, that feeling when it begins to come on, and your mind's beginning to wander off to lustful things, and to girls, and to images, and to stuff that you may have seen before, or your mind starts thinking about ways that it can feed the habit. My mind has learned to distinguish between two things. One is lust and one is love. Lust is anchored in the physical, which can be part of love. Love is anchored in the will and in the mind. Love isn't dependent on how I feel. Love isn't dependent on whatever comes my way. Lust is subject to all of that physical stuff. And again, that's not revelatory, and so, maybe a lot of us know that here, but for me, just having my mind tell me that in a moment where I could go either way, I have found to be massively liberating. Thank you for listening.